Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 3 team selection. I've got 2 free transfers, 2.5 million in the bank, and to be honest, I've got no idea what I'm doing. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. We are on the road to 100,000 subscribers, so please do subscribe if you've not done so already. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So we are wasting absolutely no time at all today, jumping straight into the video. As I said in the introduction, 2.5 million in the bank and 2 free transfers. The team value is stacking up nicely, and the team in general doesn't look too bad. I think the major thing for a lot of people this week is actually our teams look very good without using any transfers. Some of the players that we want to bring in, yes, may have better fixtures both in Game Week 3 and longer term, but we've got the decision to make. Do we try and just roll our transfers and maybe not make any too many changes to our starting 11 now and make the move in Game Week 4? Or do we get a little bit aggressive in Game Week 3 and take out a player with a good fixture that may be a good asset for a player with maybe slightly better fixtures or that is a slightly better asset? And it always feels pretty dodgy in FPL, taking out a player with a good fixture for another player with a good fixture, because it always feels like it could backfire. And as we'll go through my team today, you will see that I'm in a very similar dilemma to a lot of you, where my team looks really good with 2 free transfers. And it's about whether you just take out a player that maybe it's more like a luxury transfer where you don't need to remove them, but you're maybe still chasing that upside. So we're going to go through all of that today. The team is rated at 92% in Game Week 3 to Game Week sort of 6 or 7. It's over a 5-game week period, according to Fantasy Football Hub, and projected to get 65.6 points in Game Week 3, which is actually pretty good. You can still get your team rated for free by using the link in the description. You can also get access to AI recommended transfers and 50% off at the moment. So all of those links will be down below in the description. Do check Fantasy Football Hub out. So we'll start with the goalkeepers, and maybe not the best choice at the start of the season. I did go for Pickford. I do still back that generally I do like going for a 4.5. So if I didn't go for Pickford, I would have gone for Johnston. And of course, Johnston has picked up more points, and we probably would back Crystal Palace to be a slightly better defence. The reason I went for Pickford was the fixtures are really good. I actually think that Everton, despite having quite easy pre-season fixtures, they did look pretty tight at the back in pre-season. And also towards the back end of last season, there was an improvement under Dyche. So I think we assumed, maybe wrongly so, that Dyche would tighten them up even more this season, and that Everton might be an okay defence. We haven't seen any of that in the first opening 2 game weeks, but the fixtures are there, and I would still back Everton and Pickford to get clean sheets, despite the fact that they aren't the best defence. So yes, it may well be the case that if you've got absolutely nothing to do with your starting 11, and you've got Pickford in goal, you could make a move. I've got 2.5 in the bank. I could do like Pickford to Ederson if I want to back the clean sheets, or Pickford to Onana if I want to cover the United defence. But I look at all of the options, and I don't even see a keeper that I particularly want. I could make the switch to Johnston, but it looks like Palace maybe are trying to sign Henderson, which could create some competition. Emi Martinez, do I back Villa enough defensively? Maybe. Onana's got tricky fixtures. Ederson doesn't make saves. So yes, Pickford's not great, but who on earth am I moving Pickford to? I mean, I know a lot of people are looking at maybe Sanchez for the Chelsea fixtures, and Sanchez probably is still first choice, but Chelsea have just signed another keeper, apparently to compete with Sanchez. So I don't really like any of the keepers. So for now, Pickford stays. And of course, I'm going to start Pickford with Wolves at home ahead of Turner with Manchester United away. The defence is actually really good this week. The only defender that I definitely won't be playing is Botman. Obviously, Liverpool at home isn't great. Liverpool haven't been great, but they will score goals, and I would back them to score against Newcastle. So, realistically, I've got 4 options this week, and unfortunately, because I have so many decent attackers, I can only start 3 of them. So, I've got Chilwell, Estepinian, Saliba, and Udogie. I don't know what his name is at this stage. Is it Udogie? Let me know down below what you think it is. Everyone says something different, but I'm going to call him Udogie for now. I've got those 4 options, and I think, firstly, Chilwell and Estepinian for me are going to be locked into my 11. Chilwell is so attacking, and arguably the best fixture in the league you can hope for at the moment. I do think Sheffield United is arguably up there as well, but so far from what we saw in Game Week 1, Luton looked very leaky, and they didn't look very threatening going forward. That being said, we didn't actually see them in Game Week 2 because they blanked, so maybe Luton aren't as bad as we're giving them credit for, but we are by all accounts expecting them to be one of the weaker teams in the league this season, and that looks like a really nice fixture for Chilwell, basically playing like a left winger. And I do think that Chelsea haven't been terrible defensively. I know they've conceded 3 to West Ham. They conceded quite a few chances in Game Week 1, but I could see a clean sheet here, and I could definitely see an attacking return for Chilwell too, so he's not going to be benched. And Estepinian is almost starting to feel like a Chilwell, if not more. I mean, 3 attacking returns in the opening 2 game weeks. His data's really strong too, and Brighton just attack with such venom, so I would expect Estepinian to continue to get chances to get attacking returns. Obviously, he's not going to get 3 attacking returns every 2 weeks, because that would be 57 attacking returns this season, but we know that he can still get attacking returns over the coming weeks, and this is a decent fixture against West Ham at home. Brighton haven't been very good defensively in the opening two, but last season they were still pretty strong, so I would back them to still keep some clean sheets this season. So hopefully, maybe he's got his attacking returns out the way in the opening two, but maybe there are clean sheets to come for Estupiñán. So Estupiñán and Chilwell are pretty much locked in. The final decision that I have in my backline, and I would absolutely love your help down below in the comments, please don't only say which one you would start, but give some reasoning for it, and try not to be biased, because pretty much everyone hates Spurs. And this is both from a footballing and FPL perspective. Everyone seems to hate Spurs, and also people just say, well, Spurs will never keep a clean sheet, which just isn't true. I actually don't think they've been terrible defensively in the opening two, especially in Game Week 2. They were actually pretty solid with Sarr and Basuma. So do give me some reasoning. I've got Saliba and Udogie. Now, I think clean sheet-wise, I absolutely agree, because it's a home fixture, because Fulham are a bit stinky, in my opinion, and also because I think Arsenal are the better defence. I would say, generally, Saliba definitely has a much better chance for a clean sheet. Actually, if you look at the clean sheet odds, so I don't bet, I don't advise gambling, but if you look at the clean sheet odds with the bookies, it looks like about 20% higher chance of a clean sheet for Saliba in comparison to someone like Udogie at Spurs. So Saliba's definitely got the greater chance for the clean sheet, and probably the better fixture from a defensive perspective. That being said, Bournemouth have not been good defensively in the opening two. They've been really good going forward, and they've caught teams on the counter too. So I would expect probably that Spurs could concede, but they've also conceded the second most shots in the Premier League in the opening two. And I feel like Bournemouth are very, very leaky at the back. I think they'll continue to be. And I also think that Udogie has been incredibly attacking. He's playing very similarly to what we're seeing from Chilwell and Estupiñán. He's just not had the attacking return yet to go along with that. So I think basically the decision that I've got to make is, do I back the clean sheet in Saliba and a potential sort of 6 to 8 points, as we saw in Game Week 2, or do I back the attacking returns and potential clean sheet with Udogie? I think at the moment, I've got Saliba in there because I think it's the sensible decision. If I wasn't playing FPL and someone said, who do you think, what's more likely, a Saliba clean sheet or an Udogie attacking return? The clean sheet is more likely. If you're going by the odds, then the clean sheet's more likely than a defender getting an attacking return. But I feel like Udogie's got the higher upside. So it's whether I want to back the, I would say more likely to get you some points is Saliba, but the more likely to get you the big haul is Udogie. So I'm sort of pretty much 50-50 at the moment. I've been switching them back and forth. I didn't decide to switch the graphic because I just genuinely don't know at this stage. But please do let me know down below what you think. I think I'll probably end up on Udogie because I like the idea of that high upside and that haul, but I feel like Saliba is the more sensible decision. Let's move on to the 5-man midfield. So guys, this is what is causing me the biggest headache in Game Week 3, is that I'm not particularly happy with my midfield at the moment. Apart from Mbeumo, they're all really underperforming and they're not looking great. And I could conceivably see myself selling 3 or 4 of these in the coming weeks. I'm just having a very hard time justifying selling them ahead of Game Week 3. There's a few reasons for that. Number one, they are 4x. We're looking at outside of Mbeumo, by the way. So Martinelli, Rashford, Fernandes, Saka, the double United, double Arsenal. They are good assets, and they will continue, I'm sure, to be good assets as well. They will pick up attacking returns, and they are playing for 2 teams that you would expect to continue to attack well this season. So historical data would suggest that these 4 will come good. Also, the data for Rashford and Fernandes in particular is absolutely brilliant. We spoke about this in the Game Week preview video yesterday. It's really, really good for both of them. So the data would suggest that Rashford and Fernandes will have returns soon as well. Saka and Martinelli a little bit more worrying because when Nketiah plays, I feel like he really, really damages the amount of goal threat that Martinelli and Saka have because they don't seem to link up as well. When Jesus is in the team, they make runs in behind. Jesus drops a little bit deeper. When Nketiah plays, he hogs all of the chances. And it does look like Arteta will continue to play Nketiah. So listen, there are pros and cons for all of them. Maybe we'll discuss on the deadline decisions video and also on the deadline stream, like priority selling them, because it's quite difficult to decide who you want to sell. But the reason that I'm having such a hard time is I can't really justify selling them this week because of the stuff I've just mentioned. But also, they both have really, really good fixtures, and all 4 of them are much better at home. So I've actually got the stats next to me for the 2022-23 season. All 4 assets had better data at home than away, and Rashford and Saka in particular had significantly better data at home. So Martinelli's XGI at home was 0.7 versus away 0.6. So just a slight improvement for Martinelli. And Fernandes at home was 0.9 and away was 0.7. So Martinelli and Fernandes, we're talking about a subtle improvement in expected data at home, which you would expect. Most players and teams tend to perform slightly better at home. But Saka and Rashford, there is a stark contrast. Saka's XGI at home is 0.8 and away from home is 0.3. That is terrible. That's not average. That is really, really poor data away from home. So Saka just doesn't perform away from home. But at home, he's got really strong data. And Rashford's is even crazier. Rashford had 1.1 XGI at home last season per 90 and 0.5 away. So more than double the XGI at home for Rashford. So yes, I don't think Rashford looks overly good at the moment. And yes, Saka, without penalties, which we're going to discuss in a second, but without penalties, Saka is not a fantastic asset. The data's just not there to back it. But at home, they're so good. And then you look at the fixtures. Forest was so bad away from home last season. They picked up something like 7 or 8 points. They only picked up 1 win away from home last season too. They will play more of a low block. They won't press Manchester United, which does tend to suit us as a team. And Fulham just aren't great. They are absolutely stinky at the back. We've spoken about this. Last season, they were 14th or 15th for expected goals conceded, and they've started the season really poorly too. So it's not me sitting here and saying that I think these 4 are all great assets and I will not want to sell them in the future. In fact, I'm looking at Rashford and Saka in particular. Also Martinelli for the minutes risk, and Fernandes just doesn't seem to pick up points. Like all 4 of these I could see myself selling, but with these fixtures, knowing how good all 4 assets are at home and knowing that Manchester United and Arsenal need a big performance because they haven't looked good over the opening 2, I am struggling to justify selling them. Now, if I were to sort of prioritize selling them, again, and we'll probably discuss this in a bit more detail in the deadline decisions video and on the stream, but if minutes were equal, I would say that my biggest issue is probably Bukayo Saka, because I think without penalties, his data's just never been there. Last season, he had worse data than Saka and Martinelli and Nketiah and Jesus. Saka's data wasn't great, but the great thing about him is he was on penalties and also his minutes are good. Now, when you do take into account minutes, despite Martinelli having the slightly better data, I would argue Martinelli is a slightly bigger issue because he seems to be coming off early a lot of the time. So despite Saka's data not being great, despite him no longer being on penalties, when you do take into account minutes, I have to say Martinelli is probably a slightly bigger issue. And you can call this bias if you want, because you guys know I'm a Manchester United fan. I don't think that Rashford and Fernandes are major issues this week. If I were to prioritise selling one, as I discussed, it really depends if Rashford moves out back to the left or if he stays as the number 9. If Rashford stays as the number 9, I would sell Rashford ahead of Fernandes. If Rashford moves back to onto the left-hand side, then I would probably sell Fernandes ahead of Rashford. But I kind of want to see one more week to see what Ten Hag does. Does he continue with Rashford through the middle, or does he move him back to the left? So I kind of want a week's more information to work out what Manchester United are doing, to see if Arsenal improve, because they haven't been great from an attacking perspective thus far. And also, I just can't justify selling them this week. So this is the issue I'm at, because there are lots of really good midfielders that I want. And the number 1 midfielder that I desperately want, and you guys, if you watched my content last season, you know how much I love this man, is Phil Foden. Sheffield United and Fulham, they are 2 of the best fixtures in the league for an attacker to play. And I would expect Foden to start both of these games as well. With the injuries and illness that they have, with the lack of options that they have. I know that Doku's just signed. I know Bernardo Silva's back, but I don't expect the team to change massively over the next 2. And I want Foden in my team. I want a piece of that City action outside of Haaland. So I'm struggling, because I would love to bring Foden in, but I just can't sell those 4. And we'll just finish with Brian Mbeumo. He's the best value asset at the moment for me in the game. He's on penalties. His minutes are fantastic. His non-penalty expected goal involvement is good too. And he's got really, really good home fixtures to come up as well. So for me, Brian Mbeumo is not an option to sell. If I were to sell my assets in order, Brian Mbeumo would actually be the last option that I would consider selling. So let me know what you think of that down below. That was a bit of a passionate rant about why I can't see myself selling any of those 4. Again, I'm not sitting here and saying that I think Martinelli and Saka are great at the moment, because they're not. And they probably won't be with Nketiah in the team. And I'm not sitting here and saying Manchester United are good and I think we'll batter Nottingham Forest 5-0. It's just saying that I'm struggling to justify it this week for the reasons that I listed. So that's the midfield. Let's move on to the forwards and then discuss where I plan on using my free transfers. So moving on to the forwards and discussing my transfers as well. We'll start with Erling Haaland. This isn't a week to back against him. There will be weeks where you can potentially back against Haaland. Last week was one of them. And of course, Salah and alternative captains did outscore Haaland. And well done if you went against him that week. But this is not the week to do it. I will advise you when I do think there are weeks you can captain against Haaland. I don't think Sheffield United away is a fixture that I would want to do it. So Haaland will be my captain. And then I've got João Pedro and Mubama. At the time of me recording this, João Pedro is 5.6. But let's say there's only 1 million between them. João Pedro is very, very cheap. And I do have 2.5 million in the bank. And all of the popular options that you would want to move to this week, Jackson, Alvarez, Wissa, I can actually get there from Mubama. So whilst the obvious thing to do in this team, a lot of people would say, we'll just sell João Pedro for someone like a Jackson. Of course, that is something that I am considering. I could also sell Mubama to any of those and have João Pedro as a really nice option off the bench if any of my players get injured or if I want to rotate him in. I'll give you an example. Maddison has picked up an injury this week. At the time of me recording, I don't know how serious. Let's say he's only injured for 1 week. I don't know again. This is just a hypothetical example. Let's say he's only out for 1 week. If I had Maddison, but I also had an 8th attacker in João Pedro this week, it's nice and simple. You bring João Pedro in, you bench Maddison, and you get an extra week's worth of data. Whereas if you don't have a good sub to bring in, like a João Pedro, then sometimes you're forced to sell a player that maybe you want back straight away. So yes, it creates a bit of a benching headache. And yes, it means you'll have points on your bench, which isn't ideal from a mental perspective. But from an FPL perspective, it's a good idea to be able to rotate players in if you need to. So I really don't mind the idea of going to Mubama to an attacker rather than João Pedro. And if I actually move over to the Fantasy Football Hub recommended transfers for this week, and like I said, there will be links down below to get access to all of the stuff over at Fantasy Football Hub. As I said, 50% off at the moment. So for £3 a month, you get access to all of this stuff, including the AI recommended transfers. The transfers that they recommend, of course, Saka to Foden is on there because Foden's got high projected points. But I guess you can largely ignore that because the other transfer you can make as well, which, as I said, is Mubama to Jackson. So they aren't recommending that I do João Pedro to Jackson. They're recommending that I do Mubama to Jackson and then actually bench João Pedro this week. And of course, that does create a bit of a benching headache. But I don't necessarily mind that, as I said, because when I look at my team, I think it's nice to have the option of João Pedro when I want it. Yes, it might create a bit of mental fatigue, I suppose, when I have bench points every single week. It's not ideal. But at the same time, I'm trying to think about what is optimal for my team, not about what will cause me the less mental anguish with the amount of points on my bench. And having that option there could be nice. So that's something I'm thinking about. With respect, if we just pop over back to Fantasy Football Hub here, I'll just zoom in here for the projected points. I think there are lots of options that you can move to in the forwards position. So what I've done here is I've gone over to their points projections and I've sorted game week 3 to game week 8. You can adjust it however much you want when you're over on the site, but I think game week 3 to game week 8 is a nice spell here. And obviously Erling Haaland is top, right? He's projected to get the most points, as you would expect. We've then got Jackson in second, and he is 3 points clear, or 2.1 points clear of Ollie Watkins. So Jackson is favoured by the algorithm, by the AI. They do think he's the best option. And it is really those fixtures for Chelsea. I mean, that is the reason that you would want him. And to be honest, he looks relatively nailed for now. I know Armando Broja is back in training, and I know that they are looking at potentially signing another forward, but you would expect Nicholas Jackson to still be quite nailed. So I think at the moment, he is probably my favourite option, and it probably makes the most sense. And most algorithms and AIs, if you trust that stuff, tend to back him too. I know a lot of people are saying he couldn't hit a barn door and he feels like a Darwin Nunez Mark II, and that could well be the case, but we've only seen 2 games. And if you remember, and I'm not saying Jackson is Erling Haaland here, do you remember when Erling Haaland played the Community Shield game and he missed like 2 or 3 big chances and everyone was saying he's not going to hack it in the Premier League, and then he went on to have the season he did? 2 games isn't really enough to tell whether Jackson is going to be a good finisher, whether he's going to score goals in the Prem. So I actually still really, really rate Jackson. I still feel like he could be a good option. Watkins is in there as well, and we're going to discuss this in detail in the deadline decision, so I'm not going to do it much here because I don't have him. I wouldn't be selling Ollie Watkins, is the short of it. I would be keeping him. I'm actually still looking at buying him. I have the money to go from João Pedro to Watkins. I think he's exceptionally good. Without the penalties, it doesn't really matter. They've got really nice fixtures, especially from sort of game week 7, 8 onwards. But even over the next few, they're not terrible for Aston Villa. I still really like Ollie Watkins, so he's still on my watch list. Wissa is on my watch list. Unfortunately, I've got a bit of a mental block because I've already got Mbeumo, and this shouldn't necessarily impact my decision this week because Wissa and Mbeumo are 2 assets, right? Me having Mbeumo shouldn't make Wissa any better or worse. Wissa is still Wissa, right? And that's sometimes difficult to wrap your head around. But this is why I say sometimes, especially for attackers, less so for defenders because they all share clean sheets, if that makes sense. But for attackers, you should consider them in isolation. Do I think Wissa's a great option? Yes. Maybe I should pick him, but I've got a bit of a mental block there. Sorry, I didn't untick goalkeepers there, so there was randomly Edison in with the forwards. We've got Isak as well. I think Isak's great, but not for the upcoming game weeks. I feel like that would be future game weeks. If I carry on going down, you can see Alvarez is down there after Awoniyi. So Alvarez, I think the only reason that the AI doesn't massively rate Alvarez is due to the expected minutes, but he would be a more short-term punt. I wouldn't necessarily be expecting to keep Alvarez for the next 5 or 6 game weeks. It's probably more like a 2 to 3 game week punt. But then I wonder, like, would I rather just go for someone that I think there's a greater chance that I can keep them for slightly longer than Alvarez and is slightly more nailed for minutes in the likes of, again, Wissa, Watkins, and Jackson too. So those are kind of the options that I've got. So just to go back to my team, I feel like moving João Pedro out is probably the most likely. If I don't do that and I move Mabama out instead, João Pedro's still getting benched. Regardless of what happens this week, I probably won't be starting João Pedro. So the first thing I would love to know down below in the comments, would you sell João Pedro and obviously have more money and just keep Mabama as that third forward and the third sub? Or would you keep João Pedro, pull him to the bench, and then put Mabama in instead? I should have probably mentioned this at the start, but the injury to Enciso, which we don't know how serious is at the time of me recording this, but the injury to Enciso would make me think that João Pedro is going to get significantly more minutes because Enciso was the main rotation risk for João Pedro. So I feel like he's still a really good option. I still actually don't mind him this week, but it feels like it's probably the only place in my team where it makes sense to move. So would you sell João Pedro or would you sell Mubama? And then the other question is, who would you bring in out of all of the forwards that I've mentioned? I probably am leading Jackson at the moment, and I would probably say ALVAREZ is in second and Watkins in third. That's probably the way I'm leaning at the moment. I'd love to know how you rank the forwards at the moment. Let's just move over and now take a look at my team for Game Week 3, but also for Game Week 4 as well, and start to look at how it might take shape over the coming game weeks. So guys, as I said, my team is currently rated at 93% for Game Week 3, 92% I should say. Game Week 3 is 93%, but over the next 5, 92%. Let's say that I make the move, which is probably most likely, and I know it is probably the most obvious move on paper, but sometimes the most obvious move is the best one, and that is doing João Pedro to Jackson. At the moment, that is probably what I'll end up doing. By the way, if you want to see my final transfers, I don't do this for dramatic effect. I do this to get the most information possible. I tend to make my transfers on the deadline stream, and the other reason for that is that Chelsea is the early kickoff in Game Week 3, so they are playing on Friday night. So if we do get early team news around Chelsea, it might be quite useful just to confirm that Jackson starts. I think he will, but just to confirm that, and it might make it a little bit easier. Also, if you're looking at someone like a Raheem Sterling, it might be useful to get that kind of confirmation too. So let's say that I make that move. You can see immediately, just bringing in Jackson for João Pedro takes me from 92% to 97%. So that was clearly the weak spot in my team, according to the AI at least, was having Jackson in. Of course, don't follow the AI blindly, by the way. Like, I feel like some people misunderstand what I'm saying here. It's just a good reasoning tool to have alongside your own logic. So let's say I make that move. Going into Game Week 4, I would then have only 1 million in the bank now rather than 2.5, but I would then have my 2 free transfers. And of course, the big issue that you've got in this week, especially if you've got a midfield like mine and you've also got Saliba and maybe a United defender, is that Manchester United and Arsenal play against each other. Now, there could easily be goals in this game, so I wouldn't necessarily have an issue with having a few assets here, but maybe you don't want 4 of your 5 midfielders to be playing in the same fixture where it could quite easily be a low-scoring game. So in this week, I am definitely happy to start binning off some of my Manchester United and Arsenal assets. I don't think Saliba necessarily needs to be sold. I think I've got Udogie against Burnley, or I've got Botman against Brighton. It probably would be Udogie coming in, and I'd probably have Botman first sub, Saliba second sub. So there, I don't really need to change the defenders. I've got Pickford against Sheffield United, and I've got Jackson against Forest and Haaland against Fulham, and Mbeumo against Bournemouth, right? So basically, everyone else in the starting 11 is fine, apart from those 4 midfielders. Now, I don't necessarily think we need to rush them out. In fact, I expect all 4 to do very well in Game Week 3, which I think will mean that a lot of people consider keeping them in Game Week 4. But at the moment, just due to minutes, I think the biggest risk at the moment is probably Martinelli. Now, I can see myself going 3 ways with this move here, maybe even 4. Let's say the first one is maybe a £6.5 million midfielder, like an Eze or a Diaby. I could see myself moving there to give me some funds. I could also see myself moving for Maddison if he is back in time, because I think he will be an excellent FPL asset. I can see myself moving for Foden, despite me thinking that the Sheffield United game is one of the better fixtures in Game Week 3, and I would have missed that. I can still see myself moving for Foden. And then the other one is Raheem Sterling. The fixtures we know are going to be great for Chelsea. We've spoken about this in enough detail already. Luton, obviously, we would miss, but it would be Forest, Bournemouth, Villa, Fulham, Burnley, and then Arsenal in Game Week 9. So you'd have a really nice run of fixtures, and he looks relatively nailed at the moment. But I feel like Foden is probably the first choice option in that spot. But then I do have a second free transfer. So I'm thinking at this stage, I could then remove one of my Manchester United assets, or I could remove Saka as well. Now, it seems pretty crazy to go completely without any Arsenal attackers, but the Arsenal fixtures are actually slightly trickier than the Manchester United ones. I prefer the Manchester United fixtures up until about game week 8-9 than I do the Arsenal ones. So I don't know at this stage, but let's say I maybe end up wanting to remove Rashford. I could then, like I said, still bring in Sterling. So that's where I'm thinking about potentially using my transfers in Game Week 4, is to take out one Manchester United, one Arsenal asset, and just spread it around a little bit and maybe target some of the upcoming fixtures. Going into Game Week 5, the team's not in a perfect position there, but what you would do is you'd bring out Estepinian, who's got Manchester United, and you would bring back in Saliba. You could also play Botman against Brentford. The midfield all look like they have decent fixtures. I mean, you've got Jackson and Sterling if I have them against Bournemouth. You've got Foden against West Ham. So it's not terrible by any means. And at this stage, you obviously aren't over-reliant on Manchester United and Arsenal attacking well. And of course, this is one of the weeks where you can take out Pickford and bring in Turner as well, because Turner's got Burnley at home. So I'm not going to go through to every future game week, but I just wanted to show you that one of the other reasons that I'm not overly desperate to use both free transfers in Game Week 3, and I'm considering just using one, other than my team already looking good for Game Week 3, is that in Game Week 4, there are 4 assets in my midfield that I wouldn't mind removing 2 of. And that's why at the moment I feel like 2 free transfers could be very useful going into Game Week 4. So that's the current plan. Let me know down below what you think of the plan. As I said, let me know, do you think I should sell João Pedro or Mubama, and which forward should I target as well? So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 3 team selection. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. And if you did enjoy it, please do smash the like button. Let's aim again for 3,000 likes. You've been smashing that on every video. Let's keep that going. And also, as I said, I am on the road to 100,000 subscribers. So if you are still watching at this stage and you've not yet subscribed, please do me a favor and subscribe. It's completely free for you to do, but it massively supports me. Until next time, which will be another upload today. It's going to be double upload day, a deadline decisions video, and then the deadline stream on Friday. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.